and welcome to day 2 of Mug of Research. My name's Amy Sanders, and the point about Mug of Research is to make academic research accessible and easy to consume for practitioners. If you'd like a little bit of background on what Mug of Research is all about, please go back and watch the introductory video, which also gives you some background information about the nature of the partnership that I'm going to be talking about. So for the rest of you, please grab your favourite mug and take a moment to really step back and think about the nature of network structures that feed into the partnership between Welsh Government and the third sector. So in the case of the partnership, there is a lead organisation for each network. And the purpose of that lead organisation is both to A, coordinate the network structure, and B, to really represent that network through the partnership itself, both at the TSBC meetings and the ministerial meetings. And the way that it's conceived is that every 2 years there'd be an election which would elect that lead organisation to represent the network from the 25 different thematic networks. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that there's 2 different key distinctions that's worth bearing in mind. On the one hand, there are those organisations that are lead organisations of a network that are elected by the network. So they're not, the lead organisation isn't the network itself, it's elected by its members to become the network. But in other cases, the lead organisation is actually the network itself. So it's very difficult in those cases for there to be some form of election. The second distinction I want to point out is that there's a difference in understanding of who the members of those networks actually are. So in some cases, the members of the networks might be individuals. However, the members of the organisation or the members of the network might be conceived to actually be organisations themselves. So that's very different from the individual notion. And then the third nature of membership that exists within networks is actually networks of member organisations. So in those cases, those organisations might be networks of networks. So to explain what I mean a little bit further, I'm going to share my diagram with you that summarises 6 different types of structures that I found amongst equalities networks that feed into the partnership itself. So here we can see the representative organisation type number 1. And in the case of that network, the representative organisation is the network, and its representative members, and the members that feed into its network are member organisations. In the case of representative organisation type number 2, the representative organisation is again the network itself, but in those cases, its members are individuals. If we move on to representative organisation number 3, we can see that in some cases in networks, you can have networks that have members that are both organisations and individuals. So they can be a mixture of the two. Now, all 3 of those organisational structures that I've described so far, the representative organisation is the network itself. Let's contrast that to types of networks 4 and 5. In these cases, the representative organisation is elected to be the lead representative. And so the network itself consists of, in type 4's example, it consists of a whole range of organisations that are drawn from the theme that is relevant to that network. And then those organisations elect their lead organisation. In type number 5, it's the same. But the members of the organisation, of the network itself, are actually networks too. So this is a multiple level of networks where we have a range of different networks that elect one lead organisation to represent each of those different networks in a larger network. So there you can imagine that we have a vast number of organisations being represented. This should be contrasted with the final type of representative organisation that we have here. In this final case, in representative organisation type number 6, actually it doesn't have members at all. What that representative organisation does is it actually provides a whole series of services to individuals that are relevant to the theme of that network. So when they're there as representative organisations, they don't have members, but they are able to represent the issues that are important to the individuals that they provide services to. So you can see there's a whole range of different organisational types. And this gives us some understanding of why it's confusing to really understand this notion of having an election taking place every 2 years, because it really varies depending on the type of organisation and network structure that we have. Now, one of the key findings of my research was that actually there's a real lack of communication between these different network structures of what the nature of their network structures are. Okay, so there's one more finding that I want to share with you, and that was that actually there was different ways for those networks to engage with their members. And certainly we can measure the ways that members feed into a network in a kind of quantitative way. But actually that notion of numbers can be understood in different ways. For example, we might be asking how many organisations feed into the network. Or alternatively, we might be asking how many individuals feed into the network. There's another way that we might understand the numbers, and that's the frequency with which the member organisations might feed into the network, because that varied immensely. Then, of course, there is a different way to understand how network members feed into things, and that was really recording how members are engaged in the networks themselves, because there were many different ways. In some cases, there were real formal structures. There were formal meetings that took place of network meetings. And these might take the shape of regional meetings, or they might just be one whole network meeting that takes place. Alternatively, there might be kind of regional events that take place where members can feed into the network. In other situations, there might just simply be a standing agenda item on the organisation's regular meetings that asks what issues need to be fed up to the partnership itself. However, others might be consulting with their members in different ways through online surveys. They might send out emails, they might do email consultations, or there might be some kind of informal conversation that takes place between the members and the network organisation. So you can see there's a plethora of ways that the networks are engaging with their members. So bringing all of these findings together and trying to understand what my recommendations are for the practitioners, I have 3 recommendations. Firstly, I would recommend actually the government, the third sector itself, and the infrastructure organisations that support those third sectors need to understand the different forms of networks that exist and understand the different types of network membership. In addition to that, they should not presume that there's a uniformity across these different fields and across the different themes. Instead, recognise the diversity and understand that the third sector is an ecosystem in balance. Secondly, my recommendation for the governments, the third sector and the infrastructure organisations is that they should acknowledge the many different ways that the network leads connect with their representative membership. And this means that the government and the infrastructure organisations can make realistic expectations in terms of monitoring a network's reach. But vitally, one of my important considerations here is a recommendation specifically for government and for those third sector infrastructure organisations. And that's that you should really try to avoid imposing a notion of a standardised structure for the networks and a standardised way of engaging with membership within those structures. Because actually what we need to do is recognise and celebrate the diversity of the third sector and its many ways of working. Okay, so that's the end of day 2 of Mug of Research. I look forward to sharing my findings in day 3. Thank you.